Hi, I'm Chris from Development. Let's talk a bit about the Users module, which was introduced in version 2.1. And this allows you to create a simple user registration system so that a user can log in to your application, allowing you to tie different data to specific users or just create a private login system so you can have only specific users access your application, possibly after registration. The Users module also has an optional ability to provide an email confirmation, which is done through a Mailgun account. But at its most simplest form, you can just simply register a user and use that to log them in and track that also using the webmin, which if you haven't set up, you should probably go ahead and do that because we'll be looking at that as we utilize the Users module. In this video, we're going to specifically focus on creating users and logging them in. And then in some other videos, we'll look at getting more deeper into some of the other methods, as well as how to implement the email confirmation and things like that. So the first thing, the user is in the users module is in the client module here. So under users, we can see we have a couple different methods. We can create, get, update, delete, and log in users. And in the webmin is where we can actually visualize some of these things. So in the users section of the webmin, there's some statistics here that we can take a look at. Helps us get an overview of our users. So one of the first things you want to do is create a user, and to do that we use the create method, and there's some various parameters that we can pass. The bare minimum we need is a username and a password, so we'll go ahead and create a user just using a username and a password. So core.users.create is how we do that, and we want to give it a username, which will be in this case Chris, and then a password, and we'll just call that tacos. We also need our response method, and what happens here is as far as the password is concerned, even though it goes in plain text, it will be encrypted as it's entered into the database. So that makes it difficult to decipher. Even the developer doesn't know what the actual password is, so the user only knows that. To be able to change that, we have to use the update command, which will be covered in a different video. So from here on, we should be able to do a refresh on our Corona application, and then we can run it, and our result here is the newly created unique ID for this user. And we can confirm that this user has been created by taking a look at the webmin. And in the users section here, I can see that I have one new active user. If I search the active users, I can see them listed here. This will show the most recent 100 users that have registered, and then you can search for them using search terms up here. Or when you're ready to drill down a bit more, you can click on their ID here and you can get more information about that user looking through this record here. You can also remove the user at this point and deactivate them. When you remove a user, it'll actually take them completely out of the system. When you deactivate a user, it will keep them in the system, but they won't be able to log in. So for instance, if I was to deactivate this user, then now they are no longer activated. If I look in the user section, they get pushed to this inactive area here, and I can view the inactive users. If I want to reactivate that user, I can go ahead and just hit activate, and that user will now be reactivated, and they're placed back in my active users. So that uses the most simplest form. Again, all I did was pass a username and a password, so I don't really have any other information except for that. In the case that you want to either store an email just for your own purposes, or if you plan on using the email confirmation, you'll also need to make sure that you get an email from the user. So let's go ahead and create another user. In this one we will go ahead and put an email in here. I'll just put code@development.com, and we'll need to use a different user, because if I actually try to create this user, we'll get a message back that says that I have a duplicate entry for that username already, so I can't use the same username, so we'll use something else for this. So I use Jill, and I'm going to go ahead and just use the same password so that I can remember it to make it easy. And we'll refresh this, and we get this new user ID, which means we have a new user in here, and we can go ahead and look at our users, and now we have 2 active users. And here we have Jill, and we have an email that we've collected for this one here. Again, the email is optional, but if you are planning on using the email confirmation feature, which will be covered later, you will need to collect an email address from that specific user. One of the other things we can do when we create a user is we can add some extra metadata that we can access later for different reasons. And so to do that, let's go ahead and add that key in there. We're just going to go ahead and create another user. We'll call Dan. We'll just keep the same email for the heck of it. And then we can add this table in here called extra. And anything we put in here will be added to this record. Now this is a one-dimensional table. You can't have any other tables inside this table. And the only values that you can store are strings and numbers. So for instance, let's say we wanted to save their favorite color, and then maybe we want an age parameter here. We can do that as well, and we can save that up and then create this user. And then we get the new user ID for this, and then if we go back into our users here, we can see that we have now 3 active users. And now if we take a look at Dan's record, in here in our extra field, we can see that we have this metadata now that we also will have access to. So you could use that for all sorts of different things, adding an address or whatever kind of information you might need. Later on in another video, we will look at how we can update and manage these different items here on this record. But for now, that shows how to create some of the different aspects of simple usage, and this is again without any email confirmation. These are just direct registrations. So with that, we need to be able to log in users, and to log in a user is fairly simple. We use the login method, which is here in the documentation. And to log in a user, we need their username and password. So let's go ahead and do core.users login, and we will pass the username. In this case, we'll do Dan, so we can look at all of his info. And password was tacos. We need our onResponse handler here, and then we can go ahead and we'll refresh this project. And as you can see, we get some simple information back. We get the username, the ID of that user, and then here is those extras that we had placed in there, so we can actually get access to those. So once you log in a user, you're going to want to store their ID somehow. That's up to you to do that. If in the case you want to utilize that to perhaps create other data tables that you want to add additional data, or to run some different methods on this user after the fact, such as delete them or update their record, things like that, which we'll cover in another video. But as far as logging in, this is the basics of how you do that, and this is the information you get back for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll copy this ID for now, even though again you would want to store this somehow. The thing is about logging in is that when you do log in, there's no internally there's no like token set or any kind of way that You can say, oh, this user is logged in or logged out. That is left to the developer to determine when a user is logged in or logged out. So that's just another thing to take note of. Again, since we do have that extra data, we can get access to that if we want to by using the event.result, and then we go into the extra table, and in this case, let's say we wanted that color. Then once we log them in again, we can go ahead and you can see you can go ahead and get access to that data there. One of the other things to look at is the method called get, and this method will bring back data, will bring back the most of the data in the record in a raw format. Now when we use the login, we're actually not just getting this simple set of data back, but we're actually also marking a login event that can be tracked. So we can see that in the webmin. If we go ahead and refresh this now, you can see that we've logged in a couple times, and so that's what these metrics here are giving you, is showing you the logins. And we can also see that too, once we go in here, you can see how many times this specific user has logged in, as well as when the last time they logged in here. In the users as well, you can utilize this to, this will show you the last 100 users, but if I wanted to drill down to a specific user, then I can search for that user, and then it'll go ahead and pull that up if I wanted to manage a specific user. So the one other method too that we'll cover in this video is the get method, and what this does is this takes a user ID, and so that's why I've stored this one aside. You would get that from the login. So what that would involve is core.users get, and then that just takes the user ID parameter. And we'll look at what this brings back. Again, with the get method, I'll go ahead and put my response in here. We'll run this, and as you can see, we get a lot more information back from this record, basically all of it. We're still seeing this blue because I have that being output here. And the difference between a get method and a login method, again, is that when you run the get method, you're just getting this data back, which you may or may not need. And then, but there is no event that's raised for the login itself. So when you run the get method, the logins actually don't increase; they stay the same. So that is the difference between using get and login. As far as that's concerned, that covers the basics of creating users in a basic level, and then also how you get a user and log in a user. In the next video, we'll look at more about how to update a user, and then eventually get into how to do email confirmations for users. Thanks for watching.